Okay, here we go. So today we continue the sex life of the Siddhas section of part 3, Bhagavatam, which is chapter 23. So we're hearing about how Kardama and Devahuti made the babies. And we got all the courtship yesterday. And, how elaborate and amazing it was. Then I left you with this sentence. Having excited that great woman's desires and enthusiasm to the utmost. That's half the sentence, actually. So I'm going to continue from there. Having excited the great woman's desires and enthusiasm to the utmost, he assumed 9 separate forms and made love with his beloved for many years. So let's stop there. That's it. That's the extent of the description. Oh, no, there's a little bit more, actually, but this is enough to talk about for a second. Everybody wants to know, why 9? Why did he make 9 separate forms? And there are several reasons, all of which are quite amazing. So let's take a little while to discuss them. Do you remember? Let me see if I need my glasses or not. Do you remember when he, in the beginning of this whole thing, right after the marriage, he was still doing a lot of meditation, and she was assisting. And then he said, "For all this instrumental help you gave me, I want to give you what I have, which is something greater than the gods possess." Remember that? He said, "I want to give you benediction, which is greater than what the gods possess." So one reason for 9 forms is that it's a little bit more than 8. Now, why is 8 so important? There's a couple of reasons why 8 is very important. First of all, remember that Kardama is a Siddha. That's why we call it the sex life of the Siddhas. He's a Siddha, which means he has achieved. He's what you would call a wizard. A Siddha is like a wizard. He has mastery of the laws of nature beyond common comprehension of laws of nature, which is something that you can get by sadhana. You can get Siddha by sadhana. So by yogic sadhana, you can get Siddhas or mystic powers. One of the mystic powers, I forget the Sanskrit term for it, but one of the mystic powers is collocation. And there's probably a version of this in Dungeons and Dragons, and I also forgot the name of it too. But by collocation, you can make duplicate copies of yourself. Now, if you're very low level at the mastery, then the duplicate copy is just a mirror image. Like a super low level version of the mastery it doesn't really do anything. It just reflects you. But the more advanced version of the mastery is you actually can create, your consciousness can occupy and use two bodies. And they don't even have to be copies of you. It could be different. And the maximum level, the yoga shastras are like this. They read like wizard tomes. They tell you the maximum level for the siddha or the magic power and etc. The maximum power for this particular siddhi is 8. The maximum that anybody can do. So, for example, up to the gods. If the gods mastered this yogic power, they would be able to create eight collocated forms themselves. Beyond 8, they can't have individual autonomy. They would have to be just mirrors. So there'll be significant instances when this rule is broken. And in fact, to my knowledge, which of course is not all encompassing. There's only 2 instances where the rule is broken. One is Krishna himself in the Rasa dance. He does way more than 8. And the other one is right here, Kardama Muni. That's not Prapti. Prapti is where you can reach something that's physically out of your reach. So there's just 2 instances where it's possible to be better than the maximum level of this yogic magic. So there's one reason why he did 9 copies, because he promised her that she would get more than what she could get from the gods. Now, there's another reason why 8 is important, and this is also scandalous and infuriating. Scandalous and infuriatingly misunderstood. The reason why it's infuriatingly misunderstood is if you, for example, if you happen to go to, like, say, an ISKCON or a Hare Krishna temple and happen to be there on the day that they discuss this verse of the Bhagavatam, you're going to hear them talk about how lusty women are. Women are so lusty. They're so lusty they need 9 men to satisfy them. You're going to hear that kind of crap. And then nobody is going to stand up and say, if they're so lusty, how come all the rapes happen by men, not women? If they're so lusty, how come all the pornography is sold to men and like 3% of it is sold to women? If they're so lusty, why are like 98% of the prostitutes selling to male customers? Like, nobody does a fact check on it, which is mind-boggling. All this stuff, when I was involved intimately with the Hare Krishna group, all this stuff would boggle my mind, and I could think, how could people not fact check? But recently, I witnessed the Trump presidency of America, and I thought, actually, this stuff doesn't boggle my mind anymore. I just see it's just a ubiquitous condition of human life. And actually, there's a statement in the Nyaya Shastras that this, the way intellect functions is just to believe by default. It has to be shown a reason to disbelieve. People just believe anything you tell them. So the explanation that they give is the reason why Kardama expanded into 9 forms is that you need 9 forms to satisfy a woman, which is true. But it's not because a woman is, you need 8, but it's not because a woman is 8 times more lusty. So the concept that women are 8 times more lusty is based on a statement which you can find in 3 places in Sanskrit. One of them is in Garuda Purana, the other one is in Hitopadesh, and the other one is in Brihat Prashara Smriti. The phraseology is Ashtaguna Kama. So I think it's Brihat Prashara, however, says Strinam Ashtaguna Kama. And then the other 2, Hitopadesh and Garuda Puranas, say Kamascha Ashtaguna Smrta. So, if just to introduce you to the word Stri means women. Strinam means, Stri means a woman. Strinam means women, plural. Ashta means 8. Kama means lust. So if you got a statement like Strinam Ashtaguna Kama, it's pretty simple. Women's have 8 lust. Something like 8 times, multiplied 8 times the lust, right? And so people make a statement. For some reason, the commentator on the ISKCON version of this verse made it 9 to match Kardama Muni's, going into 9 forms. But actually, there's a reason why it's 9, not 8. But the word that's missing, if you may have listened carefully, I told you what the word Strinam means. I told you what the word Kama means. I told you what the word Ashta means. Stri means women. Kama means lust. Ashta means 8. But there's another word in there. Strinam ashtaguna kama. Guna means quality. Guna is a positive word which means a quality. Gunavan is somebody that's very qualified, desirable. Sadguna. So the statement Strinam Ashtaguna Kama means that the quality of woman's lust is 8 times more qualified. The woman's lust has 8 times higher quality than a male's lust. A male's lust is very simple, direct, easy to detect, easy to satisfy, quick to satisfy. It's simple. The woman's form is 8 times more guna. It's 8 times more refined. It's 8 times more sophisticated. It's 8 times more qualified. You just can digest the concept of ashtaguna to see what it means. Like, it's 8 times more. It has 8 times more dimension to it. It has 8 times more quality to it. 8 times more depth. 8 times more detail. And physically speaking, the experts say that because with men especially, the ejaculation and the orgasm tends to be inseparable unless you're an expert in Tantra, the men actually have to wait a long period in between each orgasm. But the women can roll one into the next. So they can have 8 times more. For some reason, they picked the number 8. 8 times more pleasure. So understand all that. That's what the Shastras are actually saying about women. And then when the particular person who was teaching me this told me, he also told me a story from Mahabharata, which is a story of, I forget the king's name, who indirectly threatened Indra. Indra felt threatened by him, so Indra turned him into a woman. And then the king loved it. The king didn't want to go back to being a man, and when Indra asked him why not, the king said, because I love things 8 times more, and I enjoy sex 8 times more. So it's different than lust. Men are definitely more directly and bluntly lusty, but a woman has 8 times more quality to the lust, and therefore can enjoy it 8 times more. So I know most of the women that I know are jealous of men, sexually speaking, because it's so easy for a man. But also, a lot of the men that I know are, at least you can find some people who actually are jealous of women, sexually speaking, because they don't have these limitations that men have, and they have a much deeper experience. Anyway, since a woman has 8 times more sexual ability than a man does, Kardama should have expanded into 8 forms so that he could fully satisfy his wife. But he expanded into 9 because he promised her more than what she could get anywhere else. So get any questions about that? Let me know. Okay, now there's yet another reason why Kardama does. Let me make sure I code all those things. Yeah, so the first reason why he expands into 9. Yeah, that's one reason right there. The first, basically, this is a good way to organize the concept. When you talk about sex, you always have 2 facets to it. The first facet of sex is the ananda, and the second is the praja. The first aspect of sex is, remember when we looked at the universal life form, the cosmic template of life form, it generated genitals for 2 reasons, praja and ananda. So the ananda side of sex is the pleasure in it, and the praja part of it is the fact that it makes reproduction happen. So Kardama has two purposes for splitting into 9 forms. One has to do with the pleasure aspect, and one has to do with the reproductive aspect. For the pleasure aspect, he wants to completely satisfy his wife. So since she has 8 times more capacity than him, he's going to make 8 forms and plus 1 because he promised more. Then for the reproduction thing, it's also very interesting. And I think this is going to be discussed in the text. So we might go back to the text now. But anybody have any questions about this? Definitely lay to rest the idea that the Vedas think that women are 8 or 9 times more lusty than men. It's a ridiculous idea. In fact, the Vedas declare that women have something called driti as one of their 8 qualities. Driti is the opposite of lust. Driti is like patience or endurance, ability to wait. And whereas men have energy and strength and activation, which is when you hear the word lust, you think of the male thing. And if you look into modern biological stuff, you'll see that whether it's in a male or a woman, the hormone that's connected with sexual lust is the male hormone, testosterone. When a woman has no sex drive, it's because she has a very, very, very low testosterone count. And if you're a woman and you ever want to have an idea of what it's like for a man, imagine if you injected yourself with 100 times the testosterone that you normally have. Kama doesn't always mean lust. Abhishek Dvivedi says correctly. It literally means desire. Actually, kama can also mean special love or attachment. And so this is another meaning of ashtaguna kama, especially when you have the word guna with it. And it's actually wrapped up between the two. And the story of the king in Mahabharata who was changed into a woman and wouldn't change back illustrates that, because he said, I love things more deeply, and therefore my experience of love. Sex is an expression of love. So if you have a deeper love, then your enjoyment of the expressions of love is also going to be deeper. So because women have deeper attachment, more intimate attachment, more full attachment, more complete and open attachment, therefore they can actually enjoy all the expressions of love more deeply. Barta says the recreational side of sex is more available to women than... No, actually, no. I wouldn't say that at all. Because it's much more sophisticated. It's ashtaguna kama. It's not recreational. If you're a man, all you have to do is find a hole in the wall. And it's that simple. If you're a woman, it's 8 times more complicated. It's 8 times more confusing, difficult, and deep. Therefore, potentially 8 times better. But recreational kind of means fun, easy. That's for men. If you look in the zodiac, you'll see fire signs are male and water signs are female, but you'll also find that air signs are male and earth signs are female. And the recreational component of life is air. And so actually the ability to just have fun without strings attached is a male quality. So I wouldn't say, and that's why you find recreational sex is sold to men. And it's not sold to women. Men will buy they will pay money for recreational sex. Women won't. Why? Why bother? It's not something in their vocabulary. It's not a recreational thing. It's an art form. It's something deep. Of course, not every woman is the same. Not every woman has equal levels of Mars. Every woman has equal levels of testosterone. We're talking about femininity as a class versus masculinity as a class. 8 qualities actually have nothing to do with the female sexuality. Ashtaguna kama. So you're saying that this suggests that the woman's kama has 8 qualities. That's an interesting point. I don't know that they were ever enumerated. I always took it as the quality is eightfold. Interesting. Right. Anyway, it's complicated. Okay, so now let's talk about. We talked about the enjoyment version. Why would Kardama take 9 forms? Because he has actually a male has 9 times less sexual stamina than a woman does. I mean, it's so obvious. It's just so this is your everyday life. Like that's just the way that it happens all the time. Yes. No. Why can men not provide good sex to women? There's two reasons. There's two just frankly, there's 2 reasons. One is that the men don't have 8 times less stamina, and two is that they have 8 times less depth in their emotional connection. That's all it is. So if you they take surveys of sexual satisfaction and the lesbians score way higher than the heterosexual women do, because even though there's no like it's not easy naturally speaking or biologically speaking to make it happen. It's because then they have similar stamina and they have similar depth. This is why, actually speaking, in heterosexual relationships, you really don't want the macho man and you really don't want the super girly woman because they're very, very, very difficult to get along with. You really want people who have closer to balanced qualities and access to both sides of the spectrum. Lava says it's emotional stamina. Well, emotion is the base for physicality. So it must be emotional stamina. Hi, Fabrizio. So, yeah, all right. All right, so let's go on. So, having excited that great woman's desires and enthusiasm. Oh, another point to mention. This has to do with the reproductive part. The excitement of Devahuti was so crucial for 2 reasons. One was because he wanted to satisfy her because she did so much for him. He wanted to give something back. The other, it has to do with procreation. It's very important who is excited. It's very important to be excited, and it's very important who is excited. Remember, we talked about the conditions during the conception, which led to the creation of Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, the original demons. So the conditions during conception is very, very important, and it's really important that the 2 partners are feeling good about each other and feeling good in general. So let's just read on and let's see. Having excited the great one's desires and enthusiasm to the utmost, he assumed 9 separate forms and made love with his beloved for many years. It seemed like but a moment to her, even still, because she was oblivious to the passing of time while she dallied in the beds of that amazing romance-nourishing palace in the company of her handsome husband. 100 autumns passed like a few minutes, while husband and wife made love, delighting in extreme pleasure through their mystic powers. 100 years of sex, uninterrupted sex. And why is it 100 autumns? Because the autumn season, there's 2 seasons that are really romantic. Just like you got the sunrise and the sunset are quite romantic. The seasons, which are the equivalent of sunrise and sunset, the spring and the fall. but the autumn is really associated with romance, more so in Vedic culture than spring, although they both. I mean, spring is where you have the Cupid festival, which nowadays is um, Valentine's Day. But fall is where you get more romantic stuff. When you get to the 10th part of Bhagavatam, you're going to see Krishna has two big events, romantic events, one in the spring and one in the fall. And the one in the fall is bigger. The next paragraph, which is the last paragraph in the section. Oh my God. That powerful man fulfilled all his promises. Remember the videos that I did on Uttara Palguni? If not, go and watch them after this. Uttara Palguni ruled by Aryaman. Yes, that's not a mistake. Uttara Palguni ruled by Aryaman, the promise keeper, the oath holder. And the nature of the male is to, if the male can evoke trust from the female, then he wins the female by evoking her trust. So look at Devahuti's Kardama's description. He's powerful and he fulfilled his promises. That's male. He knew her heart and mind as well as he knew his own. That's also pretty damn important. He divided himself. Now the text explains. He divided himself into 9 forms to grant her 9 daughters of 9 dispositions who would eventually marry the 9 unmarried progenitors and thus finally fulfill Brahma's mission of populating the world. So there's 2 reasons. There's 2 forks of reasoning why he became 9 men. The one fork is, hey, it's just fun. Let's have a great time. We're going to do this for 100 years. Let's at least have 9 people. That's one fork. The other fork is the reproductive fork. Brahma is the guy who told him in the first place, I need children. So he's doing this whole thing for Brahma ultimately. And Brahma has created 10 Prajapatis, which includes Kardama. So the other 9 don't have wives yet. So we need 9 daughters. This is why he spent so much effort and endeavor to make sure that his wife was very, 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 very stimulated. You'll discover this in the 5th part of the Bhagavatam. The 5th part of the Bhagavatam, if I'm not mistaken, it's the 5th. Maybe it's the 6th. I think it's the 5th part of the Bhagavatam talks about the embryo in the womb, etc., and it describes the different months of gestation, and it describes conception. And it says that the gender of the child is determined by the dominant hormone in the fluid around the conception. So if the male has stronger emission than the female, then the child will come out to be male. And if the female has stronger emission than the male, then the child will come out to be female. Stronger, not in like quantity or something, but stronger in the strength or intensity of the hormone that's present. So that's a basic science known to these yogis. So if you want a daughter, then you get the wife really into the sex. If you want a son, then you get the man really into the sex. So he needed 9 daughters. So this is why he took so much trouble to make sure that she would definitely be more excited about it and more into it and more turned on and more enthusiastic to participate than him. And that's why the pleasure side of the sex also is important in the reproductive side of it. They're not really separated. See you, Catherine. Um, Very nice autumn heart and leaf. So that's really cool, right? Devahuti gave birth to the daughters without gestation. That's also very cool, right? Who wants to gestate for 9 months? So if you were a goddess, you could probably get around that, right? Devahuti did that. They were completely beautiful and smelled like red lotus flowers. So that's the end of this section. We'll save the next section for tomorrow. Any last bits? Yes, L1G. Good to see you here. So hopefully, for those of you guys who have no exposure to Hare Krishnas and stuff, this is just some interesting stuff to you. Hopefully, for anybody who's watching or will be watching who's coming from that background, also, this has addressed and clarified the rather infuriatingly misunderstood points about why Kardama split into 9 forms. All right, then we shall leave it for today. Tomorrow we're going to hear about what happened next. Because remember, Kardama made an interesting promise to Manu, Devahuti's dad. His interesting promise was, I'll be the best husband I could possibly be while we are actively married, making babies and raising children. Well, which takes a moment, right? Because Devahuti gives birth to full-grown children through mystic power. So, what happened next? You know, they were married for at least 100 years. It wasn't short, but what happens next? He says, after this period, I'm going to take sannyas. I'm going to leave and go focus exclusively on meditation again, like I did before this. So that's going to happen next. But let's see. There's some little interesting. There's a very interesting dialogue between Devahuti and Kardama, and there's one really important thing that's going to happen in between now and when he leaves, and you should be able to figure it out. If anybody can figure this out, I'll give you a golden star. See if you can figure out in the chat. What is missing from the story? What? The Kardama's going to leave already? What's missing? What's the whole reason for telling the story in the first place? It's not just to have a discussion about sexology. The Kama Sutra is already there. She's not going to go with him. She's not going to go with him because he's a Brahmana and she's a Brahmana, so they separate. Yes, Om Bishach knows it. The whole purpose for telling this story is to tell the story of Kapila, Avatar. And the whole purpose of telling the Kapila Avatar story is to give a spotlight to the conversation between Kapila and Devahuti, his mother. So that seems to be missing. We just got this whole fantastic story of how Kapila's 9 sisters were born. But where's Kapila? So that's tomorrow. See you then. Yes, actually, very good, Samantha. That's also going to be discussed. Devahuti's son.